Hi, welcome to Audiobook Academy. This is a self-paced audiobook. There's no need to keep an eye on things. Just pay attention. Thank you for taking the time to listen. This is a book summary of Dare to Lead, Brave Work, Tough Conversations, Whole Hearts by Brene Brown. Close your eyes and imagine someone or something that embodies daring and bravery. An alternative view of modern workplace culture, Dare to Lead emphasizes the importance of trust, values and perseverance as the most important leadership qualities. Daring to lead is the ability to accept leadership that exposes one's own fears and insecurities. Brene Brown, author of the book Brene Brown's Breathwork, has become an inspiration to millions of people around the world. She's a professor, public speaker, researcher, and best-selling author who pushes us to think differently about the world and about ourselves. To summarize, we'll look at Brown's critique of current leadership styles and why bravery needs to be reframed in a different way. There will be discussion of how to be better leaders, the importance of cultivating a healthy work environment, and how to be brave and vulnerable. We are shown alternative and more gentle ways to show true bravery by providing courage-building skills. The foundation for fostering creativity and innovation is a firm grasp of bravery. Tough working environment. When you make a mistake at work, how do you feel about yourself? To avoid appearing incompetent, failure is something that many of us strive to avoid at all costs. As a result, when we commit a mistake at work, we tend to act in a self-protective manner. In the Culture Code, Dan Coyle discusses group dynamics and chemistry and encourages us to think about our own workplace culture. He examines how safety and security, sharing, and story affect the success or failure of a group. People thrive in an environment where they can be themselves, make mistakes, and work toward a common goal. We've accepted the shame of failure as the dominant culture, and this has resulted in subpar decision-making and performance. When it comes to leadership, this can manifest as a desire to appear in charge and avoid admitting failure, or as a desire to spare others' feelings by withholding criticism. Passing the buck or shifting blame is a common reaction to failure. We believe we can deflect and decoy attention by pointing out the faults of someone else. We may also avoid admitting our mistakes or engaging in difficult discussions, which means there is no incentive to come up with a solution. Alternatively, we may avoid taking risks because we're afraid of failing, which may be the case for those of us who strive for perfection. These behaviors are not proactive, and they create a toxic work environment in which people are constantly on the lookout for ways to belittle and humiliate each other. Changing bad leadership requires adopting the core values of bravery and demonstrating that being brave means being open and vulnerable. True bravery is not aggressive or combative, but rather empathic. Strength comes from the ability to be vulnerable. The key to being brave and courageous is to be willing to admit your weaknesses. We've been given a false narrative about leadership, and Brown's advice is to look at it in the opposite light. True leadership, according to her, comes from acknowledging one's weaknesses. In Brown's research, it has been found that bravery and courage cannot be achieved without the feeling of vulnerability. All of the people who participated in the study about leadership admitted that they felt vulnerable when they had to take a risk. When we are vulnerable, we open ourselves up to the scrutiny of others or the perception that we are putting ourselves at risk. As a result, we'll always feel vulnerable because we're putting ourselves at risk, whether it's our safety or our reputation. As a result, courage necessitates both vulnerability and openness. In other words, what are the best ways to deal with our anxieties and fears associated with being vulnerable? To begin, we must stop considering openness as a sign of fragility. It's actually the opposite. Ignoring your feelings and vulnerabilities is actually a sign of weakness. It's important to note that trust and vulnerability aren't already established, rather, they are the result of ongoing negotiations. You don't have to have total trust in someone to be vulnerable, and you don't immediately gain trust by being vulnerable. Building trust and revealing our vulnerabilities are long-term processes that take place over time. To sum up, vulnerability doesn't necessitate revealing all of your secrets. Vulnerability, on the other hand, implies setting limits and doing so in a context-appropriate manner. Rather than having polite conversations, have honest ones. Being a good leader necessitates having difficult conversations. Even though it's difficult to have these kinds of conversations, admitting that you're vulnerable is a way to make the process a little easier. Unkindness comes from withholding, delaying, or tamping down information, whereas kindness comes from being open and honest. You must be direct and honest, and you must resist the urge to be polite or sugarcoat your remarks. In order to be honest, it is not necessary to be cruel or unkind, but it is necessary to be critical and to point out areas for improvement. Holding people accountable when they don't even know where they're falling short is unjust. Another issue is that we tend to mistakenly associate easy emotions with the more difficult ones. There are many ways to describe our feelings, including tired and stressed, which are often used as catch-all terms for a wide range of emotions. When you know what others are going through, you can respond more effectively and put policies in place that benefit everyone. It's all about dealing with the self. Keeping emotions and vulnerability bottled up encourages the ego to take over, which is counterproductive to a healthy work environment. There is a strong desire to protect our egos when we're operating in a hostile environment. Many times, I've been afraid to take on a new challenge because I was afraid of making a fool of myself or not being good enough. When we're nervous or anxious about our performance, it's because our egos are working against us, says Brown. We're afraid of failing or making mistakes because we're searching for perfection, so we don't try. Workers should be encouraged to take risks and fail in the workplace. This can be accomplished in 3 ways. One of the first things to keep in mind is to avoid rewarding defensive behavior. We're taught from a young age to avoid making mistakes, and we're rewarded for it. It's common to see people rewarded for perfection, but this is unhealthy because no one gains knowledge by consistently performing well. In addition, we are prone to criticizing without offering alternatives or suggestions. It's critical to think of criticism and solution finding as 2 separate but related processes. If someone is acting defensively, it's important to call them out on this. We must be brave enough to stand up to defensive actions if we want to be a good leader and have open communication. Being a good leader means making suggestions for improvement and giving honest feedback. Finally, when dealing with ego, don't forget to give credit where credit is due. Employees should be commended for their bravery and vulnerability when it is demonstrated by their co-workers. You don't have to feel bad about yourself. I believe shame is a genuine and powerful human emotion. Feelings of inadequacy and worthlessness are common companions to shame. It's common for us to look at our self-worth and think we're not good enough when we don't meet our goals or expectations. There are more healthy ways to deal with shame, according to Brown, who takes a different approach. Openness is a healthy and progressive way to deal with shame. Again, empathy is the key. The shame we feel can be used as a learning opportunity if we show support and empathy to those who are experiencing it. Empathy, according to Brown, is the key to being a courageous and successful leader. There are days when we all have a bad experience at work. If only there were a way to erase those days. It could be the result of a disastrous presentation, a tense meeting, or even a major oversight. A good leader will make a connection and show empathy with these experiences. It's important for employees to know that their bosses care about them, and empathy is a great way to do this. What are your core beliefs and belief systems? Practice and perseverance are necessary for dealing with vulnerability. Daring to lead requires you to identify and focus on your core values, so that you can be more resilient in the face of challenges. What would you include in a values statement about your life? There's no doubt in my mind that you have a long list of things that you hold dear. Values can be easily stated, but narrowing them down to a few core ones can be difficult. We must have a strong sense of values because when things get tough, they force us to focus on what really matters. A strong sense of values helps us avoid taking the easy way out when faced with adversity. A list of values is a good place to begin, but the next step is to analyze each one and determine which 2 are most important. This is a process that requires patience and discipline, but it's worth it because it helps us communicate more effectively with others. If honesty and well-being are a company's core values, this could translate into open communication, critical feedback, and the ability for employees to leave work early and avoid working overtime. Everyone can self-evaluate and consider whether their actions are in line with what is important to a company when they have a firm grasp of the company's core values. Having faith in each other. How much of your word can you count on? Most of us believe that we are trustworthy individuals. However, there is always a weak link in any chain of trust. When Varys asks Tyrion how many others knew about Jon Snow's lineage, Tyrion tells him 8. According to Varys, it's not a secret at all, it's just information. Knowledge is a powerful tool, but establishing trust can be a challenge. Most of us avoid talking about trust issues. With all things, Brown urges us to acknowledge the elephants in the room and express our trust and insecurity. It takes courage to lead and honesty to admit that there are flaws and potential problems in one's own leadership style. As an example, a leader may not have faith in another person to lead a project. It's more likely that she will say, "Your time management is a problem. We need to work on that before you can take the lead on this," rather than, "I don't trust you with this." Remember that building trust in a team is a process that requires small and consistent acts of trust. Open communication and a lack of self-censorship are the keys to feeling connected and building trust. Braving. We're often afraid of hurting someone's feelings because we want to appear strong or because we find it difficult to be objective in our criticism of them. The acronym BRAVING can be used to build trust and connection. Everyone needs to establish their own personal boundaries. It enables us to say no and recognize when we've crossed someone else's limits. First and foremost, we need to establish a sense of clarity in order to build trust. To collaborate effectively, you need to be aware of the capabilities of your coworkers. Everyone is governed by adhering to deadlines and fulfilling their roles and responsibilities when it comes to being reliable. It's easier to put your faith in someone if they can demonstrate their dependability. Accountability is the next step in this process. When we fail to live up to our obligations, we must take responsibility for our actions, make amends when necessary, and work to improve our performance. When we blame someone else for our mistakes, it's one of the most dishonest things we can do. The closing of the vault signifies that we can now be trusted with sensitive data. Any information that has been given to us in confidence must remain confidential, and we must not make public anything that hasn't been given to us in confidence. Integrity comes into play here. When we say we have integrity, we mean that we adhere to our principles regardless of the challenges. Non-judgment and generosity round out the list of virtues. Instead of passing judgment, show some curiosity. Find out why someone acted the way they did by asking questions. Don't make hasty assumptions. And this is where generosity comes in, which is defined as acting with positivity and empathy. People will look up to and respect you if you conduct yourself in accordance with BRAVING principles. Also, don't be afraid to take the first step toward failure. Your failures will inspire others to take risks and look for new ways of doing things. To sum it up, to lead effectively, Dare to Lead takes a remarkably human-centered approach. What makes us human is examined and a gentler approach to asking for what we want from others is suggested. Though non-aggressive, it is the most effective method for cultivating the best aspects of human nature and collaboration because it is non-coercive. Brown teaches us that the most courageous thing we can do is to be vulnerable. We must all make an effort to see our flaws and honestly assess our own strengths and weaknesses. As a leader, it's not about pretending to be perfect, but rather about being honest with ourselves and others and leading by example. So focus on communication and empathy, question your values, and cultivate trust and resilience to take charge. The only way to summon power is to accept and embrace one's weaknesses. As a result, we're better able to handle our emotions rather than simply numbing them. Daring greatness and gentle leadership are now the hallmarks of an exceptional leader. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Please don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. See you in next audiobook.